Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Redefining Everything, where everything is up for discussion. I'm loving having these conversations, and today I'm super excited to introduce you to Dr. Erin Baker. We have so many topics that we love to talk about, and we can talk for hours and hours and hours, but today we're going to be talking about ambition. Before we jump into our conversation about ambition and how we redefine how we think about ambition and our relationship to ambition, I'd love it if you could just take a few minutes to introduce yourself.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. And when you talk about me being Dr. Erin Baker, let me tell you that I have a PhD in social psychology. And not a lot of people know what that is. They think I'm a therapist, but I am not. So, I am an expert in understanding everything from the outward behaviors people have to their deep inner beliefs and attitudes and values and how the social world shapes that. And so, one of the topics around that is people's ambitions and motivations. Right now, I am working in a tech company. I've been working in the tech world for 5 years, and my job has been actually to understand how people's beliefs and motivations and attitudes shape their use of technology, especially Facebook. But in the last couple of years, I've been managing teams, and I've gotten more interested in the people I manage than the people who use our tech products. And I've been noticing that they all wear this badge of honor around being ambitious. And so today I want to share with you about, is that a good thing? And if it isn't, can we make it a good thing?
That's really fascinating, especially because, I think, what I think is really interesting is like you have the apps, and obviously the research you're doing around the apps is really, really important, but then you're involved in these interpersonal relationships in your workplace. And I'm not in the tech world, but I'm assuming what I know of it is it is so fast paced, they're really seeking out young talent often, there's definitely sort of an ethos around it. So I could see how that shows up in a big way in the environment that you're in.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people, I worked at Facebook for a while, and that's a very young demographic. It's people who just left college. They don't really know why they're doing what they're doing in life, but they've always been rewarded by grades. And now they've been rewarded by money. And there's this badge of honor around like, how can I work harder and faster and longer and achieve more? And I see, especially with these younger folks, they're very burnt out and they don't know why. And they just keep saying, well, I just need to do more. I need more projects or more work longer hours, or I just need to get that next promotion.
Yeah.
In fact, I just had an old coworker reach out to me last week just to tell me that she was waiting to hear if she got a promotion. And I just thought, I used to be in that world too. When I was working at Facebook, every 6 months we had a performance review, and I was looking for that next promotion. And then I was planning the next 6 months around what are the things I'm going to work on for 6 months to get me that promotion. What projects am I going to take on? Not about like, how do I want to learn and grow? And people would be like, you're so ambitious for taking on all these things. And it would be like, yeah, I'm ambitious because I want my promotion. I want my bonus.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying speaks to a variety of different, like it's like in our culture, because while my career that I had in my 20s wasn't the same way in terms of the path of promotions, but there certainly was this feeling of like, what's the next rung on the ladder, and to always feel like, okay, I'm here now, where do I go from here? Because like, it's like almost staying here for too long didn't give me, the hit that I needed of the external validation. And that's what a lot of my motivation was. I liked my work, but I also know now, reflecting back on it, and I also reached a point of burnout, what would be considered fairly young, was because so much of my identity was wrapped up not only in what I did, but how well I did it. And like I had friends joke with me too. It wasn't even just work wise. Like I would start a new dance practice or something, and then all of a sudden I'm doing a certification to teach. And I remember a friend being like, can't you just like take the damn class? Like why do you need to go teach it now? But it was like this, like you said, this like constant, like, okay, more, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? And and never really even stopping, it was like these constant wheels spinning. So, there's probably some obvious reasons why that can have some negative implications, but it isn't always a bad thing. You know, it's also how we show up and we do a good job, right? So I'm curious what you've discovered in terms of how, like, the nuances of ambition, and when is it a positive thing, and when does it become kind of like bad ambition?
Yeah, totally. And I totally resonate with this idea of never being able to sit in one spot. I remember when I first got promoted to a manager role, I was like, this is the end goal that I'd had in mind for so many years. I'm just going to sit in that. I'm going to enjoy it. And like a month later, I was like, okay, what's the next promotion? How can I get more and more and more?
Yeah.
So, I think part of that is this over focus on an end goal, and then not enjoying the process. And so when can ambition be bad? I think one thing is that a lot of people focus on, as you said, the external rewards of things. So whether it's, external validation from loved ones or from superiors, whether it's money, whether it's fame, whatever it is, they feel like that external reward is going to bring them a sense of inner joy. And it turns bad when they keep striving for that and they get to that next thing and they're like, well, but I don't feel fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And so that's when they say, oh, I'm going to do even more. Because maybe it's that I'm just not reaching that threshold I want to get to. But there's a lot of science around motivation. And one of the biggest things that has been found over the decades is that when you have an external reward, no matter what that is, whether it's money or validation from others, it completely deflates your own internal motivation to do this. So you stop enjoying it. And it's even so bad that if you start something like painters who love to paint, as soon as they start getting paid for their work, stop loving it. And
that's fascinating, because I've never really thought about it in the context of artists, but you hear about that happening a lot.
You do. And it's because all of a sudden now they have this like mental model that if I need to be paid for this in order to do it, I must not really enjoy it for the own purpose of enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And we hear this a lot. I mean, you and I have a friend who stopped writing because she stopped wanting to perform and could not find that internal motivation. So ambition basically can kill your own joy. So the good side of ambition is when you can really be fueling that internal sense of what you love to do and be focusing on the process. So there's a lot of different ways to think about what internal motivation might look like. But it's really this idea that like you don't care if there's a reward at the end of the tunnel. You're painting or you're playing guitar or you're doing something at work for the pure sense of like, I love doing this. And that kind of motivation actually re-energizes you as opposed to taking it out of you. So I can give an example of when I was working at Facebook. I was working many, many hours a week and I was burnt out. I am now working at a company and doing my own side business, working more hours than I ever did at Facebook. And I am so energized because the work I am doing fuels me. And so that is I have ambitious goals there, but they're goals that are truly my own. And they center around three basic principles that psychologists have found. One is we need a sense of autonomy or control. So I need to be able to choose what I'm doing. So I choose to work on this particular goal. I choose to, right now I'm taking a bunch of coaching courses. I'm choosing to do that and I'm choosing to do it on my own time. The second is a sense of mastery. So mastery is basically I'm learning and growing, and it's something that I'm willing to fail and stumble on for the sense of like getting better. So people who are ambitious in the external rewards and they fail, like their whole identity is wrapped up in it. And they feel like they're a totally horrible person. But someone who's like, I really, really want to learn how to play piano. I really, really want to learn how to be a good coach. They're willing to take those lumps because their identity is not wrapped up in it. It's just their pure joy of wanting to master a thing. And then the third thing is a sense of purpose. So I think a lot of people struggle with this in their jobs is why am I doing this? What am I doing it for? And if they don't have a sense of that impact they're having either on others or just in general what their contribution is, their ambition is misguided. So they're only doing it again for reasons that are, external to themselves. So people who are, having their own control over their destiny, they're mastering something and they have a sense of purpose to it. That's when their ambition really ignites them.
So that all makes a lot of sense. And I love that explanation. And what also comes to mind is, okay, so what if you don't have that? What if you are in a job that, you don't have that sense of autonomy, or you don't have, like, you don't even have permission to have your own mastery or really kind of explore yourself in, what would be your suggestion? Or for people that are just feeling, because I think this also, that's one side of it. And then I think also, maybe even people who just don't even know how to connect with that inner, that essence or that passion. So then it's like, well, that's great in theory, but how do I get there? How do I find that and locate that inside of me? Especially, and I mean, I can speak to this part of it, like when we have been trained for so long to only seek the external.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I think the first piece you already alluded to, which is not wrapping your entire identity up in one thing. It's really easy. We work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. That is a majority of our life, and our successes, our failures, our feelings of entrapment or whatever are really wrapped up in that. But finding other places in life to have those more internally motivated things going on is really important. So for me, I love playing guitar, or, I'm a golfer. There's also, like, I've volunteered in the past. I've given, I'm an expert on, like, gender as well. So I've tried to find enough balance in my life that I am not successful or not successful based on who I am or what I do at work. And I'm not fulfilled only based on what I do at work. So that's a big key. And a lot of people struggle with that, especially if you have a family and kids and, like, you don't have a lot of time in your day. So the second piece is, how do you find those passions, which is, I think, the number one thing. And you've talked to me about this a lot, and I struggle with it, is play.
Right.
What do you do to play? The definition of play is doing something for the pure joy of it.
Yay.
Right?
Say it again.
What do you do to play? I mean,
yeah.
I think some of that can be, like, really easily coming to people. Like, it could be as simple as, I know you have dance parties in your house sometimes with your daughter. It could be, I've heard of stories of someone who played piano 10 minutes a day, and that unlocked creativity.
Yeah.
It could be, painting, writing, whatever kind of is for the pure joy of it. One thing I've started doing for my own pure joy is what's called an artist date, which is I take myself out once a week and do something completely out of the norm that I wouldn't do normally by myself. So it could be going to a movie by myself, or going to a bowling alley by myself, or even just going and sitting at the beach. And so once you start figuring out, well, how do I want to play? You start saying, well, what are the things that I'm really lit up by? And that starts to sort of percolate into other areas. And then the other thing you can think of is this concept called flow. And it's really basically, how often do you just get lost in something and you look up and you're like, wow, 5 hours have passed. People do this all the time, but they don't notice it. So thinking about throughout the day, where do you get lost? Where do you get so wrapped up and motivated that you forget that time has happened and that nothing else could have bothered you? Maybe you don't have that yet, but maybe you've had that in the past, and you can think about, well, oh, okay, well, when I used to teach, I used to get wrapped up so much in it that, external things would not bother me. When I've written in the past, same thing. So yeah, what are those things you get lost in?
You know what I find so fascinating about what you're talking about right now is that if you just tuned in, for example, to the past 5 minutes of our conversation, you would have no idea that we were talking about ambition, because it feels so counterintuitive to what we learn and grow up with around ambition and what it takes to succeed, right? So, like, everything that we just talked about play and, creativity and experimentation and, finding that time, even just short little times, or being in the flow, it's so kind of contradictory to the words we usually associate with ambition, driven, motivated, like even motivated. It's like it's got an edge to it often. I think it's softening a little bit, but it's often been a word that we've heard of, like, are you motivated? Like, are you hustling? Are you in the grind? Like, we have all these words that we think of how we need to strive and what ambition means. And you just kind of turn that on its head completely in terms of saying, like, in order to connect with our inner sense, our internal compass, if you will, around what really does motivate us and where we can find that sense of meaning and that sense of validation, we need to play more. We need to relax more. We need to be more creative. We need to take ourselves on artist dates, to not be as productive in the sort of getting things done sense, or to be noticed when we're in that state of flow. And that will help connect us with the things that light us up, and therefore make everything in our lives more enjoyable, whether we still have to be in a job where we are like graded, for lack of a better term, evaluated on our performance. Again, that's the reality for a lot of people, or we might just be in a job where we're not super connected to what we're doing. But how do we explore that sense of like the internal motivation, the internal ambition to just show up as the best version of ourselves?
Yes, absolutely. And I think people, they equate, if you're ambitious, you will be successful.
Yeah.
Mean? Do we have to be successful in the traditional senses of moving up the ranks in a company and making more money or having power or being respected? Success can be a lot of different things. And once you start having that broader sense of what success means, maybe you're ambitious in your other non-work life because you're focused on all these other things that fill you up, and you stop thinking about, oh, well, I got to be ambitious at work. I got to move up. Maybe you just say, like, work sustains my play.
Yeah.
And I have a guy who works for me right now that it's very clear that he has that attitude. And I see him at work every day and nothing bothers him. And it's so nice to see him not wrapped up in the rat race. And when I set goals with him for the next 6 months, all of his goals were about the creativity he wants to do outside of work. And I went, wow, that's amazing. But you can be ambitious towards things that don't necessarily move you up in whatever version of success you have. You can be ambitious in your side projects. You can be ambitious in your hobbies, and you can redefine your success as something altogether different than what the rat race tells you it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that really becoming clear to me when I started spending more time in southern Mexico, where I mostly live now. And it was before I moved there, and I was still very much like I was on that like the treadmill. I think it was like, would be like, sometimes it's on the hill setting, and sometimes, but it's like, it's like you have to keep walking, and so, yeah, I'd go and I'd be like down there, and I'd only have a week or 2 weeks because I had so much going on in my life. And I remember my dad's staff really being quite perplexed with what on earth was going on in my life that was so much more important than taking, so I couldn't take more than a week off to spend quality time with my family in Mexico, where I had, my dad has a hotel, he has a restaurant, it's a really great quality of life. Like, I have all of these things. And in their mind, they're like, you have like this beautiful family and also kind of vacation experience available to you here. Why can't you, why aren't you here? What's really important to you? And really asking me, kind of directly, like, what is so important? We don't really understand why you can't spend more time here. Isn't, family and enjoyment and, spending time with each other and be like more important than like whatever it is you have going out there that means that you only get to come to Mexico for a week a year. or 2 weeks. And while I was there, I was working, and it was so interesting for me. And there was this part of me that wanted to be like, but you don't understand, it's really important. And it was important, I was always involved in like a lot of social justice work and activism. And like, I was working, like, I am fortunate that my work was also very kind of, motivated around being an agent for change. And my relationship to it wasn't always about being of service to the cause. Like, it was very much about that, external validation and what I thought I needed to be doing in order to be successful. And also the work culture that I was in, which did not, ironically, because we were working in sort of in public health, but like none of us really knew how to take care of ourselves very well. So there was also that culture of just, pushing ourselves really hard. And it was really interesting. And it's certainly something that I've noticed when I left my career and I moved there and felt like I was identityless in a way, because I was just my dad's daughter, or a hotel owner's daughter, or a
Girl on the beach.
A girl on the beach. Yeah. Just like hanging out.
Yeah.
And it was really uncomfortable for me in the beginning, because I felt like I needed to like explain to people who really didn't care. Like, really didn't care what my career had been or how successful I was, but I felt like so much of who I was wrapped up in how well I'd done and what I was doing with my job, that it was this like really interesting transition of just learning just how to be. And also starting to realize, yes, like quality of life and success can be measured in so many other ways. And certainly now, and I know you and we're working on a project together called the Daily 3, which I'll post some information about, but it's a daily journaling practice. And so in our practice of the Daily 3, we reflect on 3 gratitudes, 3 brags, which are, in a way very much linked to what we're achieving in a way, right? And 3 desires. But what's so interesting now is so many of my brags, well, my gratitudes, all of it, my brags, my gratitudes, my desires, are like not work related. Sometimes they are, and that's great. But often they're like, about how I'm showing up for people in my life, how I'm showing up for myself, what I desire, like the quality of life I desire, when I'm grateful for other kinds of abundance in my life. And it's, I started that practice 8 years ago, and it is really interesting to reflect even in the past 8 years, where the shifts have been in terms of what I value and what I'm paying attention to and what I'm recognizing myself for also. And, I think this is another piece where we can start to, like, I love that example you gave of the guy that you work with. And like, for me, like even hearing that, it made me a little bit uncomfortable. I'm like, really? Like, he went into a meeting with his supervisor and said that his goals had nothing to do with work. Like, there was even a part of me that was like, you could do that? Like, and so, I just think that's so beautiful, of really showing like how we also can internally shift what we value.
I was going to say part of this is I give my people permission to come in with non-work goals.
Mm-hmm.
It's been really important to me. And I think so I am making the transition out of the tech world because I realize that I love to coach people and I feel constrained having to coach them on work. So I very much gave my people permission to bring in personal goals as an addition to their professional goals. But I thought it was really interesting that he didn't even bring a professional goal in at all. And it was interesting to see, it's really interesting when my people bring in their goals to see what are they actually wanting to learn and grow on, and are they trying to achieve something that is mastery for them, or are they trying to achieve something external? And I've been trying to coach them in terms of what do you actually want to do to learn and grow? Don't think about your bonus. Don't think about the fact that I'm going to give you a performance review. I want to know what it is that lights you up. And I actually had an employee leave the company because I got her thinking about what lit her up. And that's one of my proudest moments, is that, and I'm sure the company doesn't like this, but I think that's a missing thing from people, is that, everybody thinks about goal setting as like only about work, or maybe it's about their health, right? I'm going to go lose weight. That seems to be a societal thing, but very few people think about like, what is it that I'm driven to do because it's fun? I love it.
Because it brings me joy or brings me pleasure and peace, you know.
And I thought, when you're talking about the daily 3, I would love to go back and look at mine. I sadly threw out my first daily 3 journal, but I've been doing it today. I think was day 324 in a row. And I have noticed I very rarely write about work. And when I start thinking about writing my desires, those are my ambitions, but they're like healthy ambitions. I desire to collaborate with Caitlin on a project someday, or, I desire to relax, which can be all an ambitious goal for an overachiever. So I think it's really interesting to see how those practices can actually shift you out of being so focused on what other people are expecting of you in terms of your success and your ambitions.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you mentioned that, because I shared this in our group, because we have a beta group right now, kind of testing out our method with other people of this daily journaling practice. And and I was flipping through to share some of my brags, because we were talking about brags and how it is hard for people, right? And that's something a lot of people in our group brought up, is that they were often very externally focused. Oh, so-and-so told me I did a good job, and I was flipping through my, this is pretty much full, almost full of the daily 3. And I was flipping through it, and a lot of my brags were really focused around slowing down, getting enough sleep, taking more time for myself, and even just reading them, it was really cool, because it helped me, like, being in a state of flow sometimes, like, inviting ease into my life. And some of them were, again, like I said, some of them were work related, some of them were interpersonal related, but that learning how to self-celebrate and like reinforce that is something I can be good at. I wouldn't say that I'm like ambitiously focused on self-care, because we don't really think about it that way, but it is, it's a goal of mine to, like, embrace more self-care and keep learning how to slow down a little bit and not push myself so hard all the time. So, again, it's kind of like flipping it. Yeah, you have to.
Because you struggle. We've talked about this. You struggle with wanting to always do all the things.
Yes, all the things, all the time.
All the time, and I'm very similar. And so it is an ambitious goal, in the sense that I think of ambition as something that's like a little bit hard.
Yeah.
Something you strive for that's a little bit hard. And so slowing down, for me, play is an ambitious goal. And I think that's okay to flip that word ambitious towards something that's, a personal challenge for yourself that you're doing because you want to.
So good. I love this. I want to keep going, but we're going to wrap up on this topic for now. We are definitely having more of these conversations. And but before we do wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to share on this topic?
Yeah, so I want to share a really famous study that kind of highlights this whole idea of the internal versus external motivation. So I don't remember exactly what year it was, but the University of Rochester, some professors had their students who were about to graduate fill out some forms about what their ambitions were. And then they followed up a couple years later to see where they were. And so some people had ambitions around wealth and fame and money, and then others had more around this mastery and purpose and having an impact on life. And what they found was that the ambitious people who wanted the fame and the money and all that, they had gotten that. They had achieved even more than they wanted, but they were anxious. They were burnt out, and they were no happier in life than they had been as college students. And then they looked at the people who had this sense of purpose and were driven by that, ambitious in that way. And they found that they had really low levels of anxiety, low levels of depression, and that they were much happier than they had been in college. So basically, the moral of the story is like ambitious people who are driven by the external rewards will get them, but it comes at this cost of higher levels of anxiety and depression that could be avoided if people just started thinking about, well, what do I actually want to do? What's my purpose?
Yeah, and we're definitely seeing that rise of anxiety and depression, across the board. And it's not often explained. I feel like we hear that so many people struggle with anxiety and depression more now than ever. And yet the real reasons for it aren't really unpacked,
Yes.
Or in a way that, like, just telling people to not be as stressed is kind of,
Yep.
challenging, right?
Yeah, and a big challenge for some of these people is they don't realize that that's what's motivating them. Because they're stopping to think about what they're doing, or they have pressures from others who are saying, you've got to make a certain amount of money in life or achieve certain levels of things. And they think their anxiety is from, oh, I'm just working a lot. No, it's because you're working a lot towards something that doesn't actually fill you up.
Yeah. Oh, well, hopefully our Daily 3 journal that will be birthed into the world and coming to you hopefully bookstores and on Amazon in 2019. And it really is a tool that both Erin and I have used a lot. And it not only helps guide you through a practice that I've used a lot with my clients now, I've used in my personal life, Erin as well, that focuses, as we mentioned earlier, on gratitudes, brags, and desires, but it also talks about the science behind why those three practices combined are really powerful. And then there's also a lot of science included around motivation and around some of these topics around like really finding your internal compass and showing up for yourself, and how to also seek evidence for what you want more of in your life. And self-motivate. So I'm really excited that we are working on that together, and we'll probably have another conversation more focused around that coming up soon. And thank you so much for your time and your perspective. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe if you want to receive these videos as soon as they go live. And also let us know if there's more topics you want to hear about, because really, as I said at the beginning, everything is up for discussion. And we'd love to have more of these conversations about how do we redefine what we think we know to be true, and how do we find a new way of exploring, or maybe new information, or create new meaning for ourselves. All right, bye for now.